Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're tackling a mystery that honestly drives almost everyone crazy when they watch the evening news. You know the drill, right? You tune in and one expert is practically yelling that a new economic policy is going to be a total disaster, while another expert, looking at the exact same economy, swears it's our absolute only hope. It kind of makes you wonder if anyone actually knows what they're talking about. It really feels like economics is just pure chaos sometimes. But here's the secret. The politicians, the pundits, and even the top-tier economists, they are often speaking two completely different languages without even realizing it. They're looking at the world through totally different lenses. And honestly, once you learn how to spot these two lenses, all those shouting matches on the news suddenly make perfect sense.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're splitting economics into two entirely distinct camps. Over on the left side, we've got positive economics. That's the side firmly grounded in hard facts and data. And on the right side, we have normative economics, which is rooted in values, opinions, and ethics. Literally every economic debate you've ever heard is just a giant tug-of-war between these two sides.
All right, let's zoom in on that left side of the map first and talk about the facts. The best way to think about positive economics is to imagine an utterly objective detective. I mean, this detective doesn't care about your feelings, your politics, or what you think is fair. Positive economics only cares about one thing: what is happening right now, or what will happen if we change a specific variable. It is strictly concerned with describing reality exactly as it exists today. This is where we build our factual foundation. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, positive economics is entirely about measurable outcomes. It is completely stripped of personal opinions. The golden rule here is testability. If you're going to make a positive economic statement, we have to be able to test it. We need to look at real-world observations, run some statistical analysis, and see if it holds up. It is entirely about cause and effect. Let's do a really quick example. An increase in the price of petrol leads to a decrease in its demand. Okay, that statement is positive. Why? Because we can objectively test it. We can just look at the market data, track gas prices over a 12-month period, watch what drivers actually do, and mathematically prove if that cause and effect relationship is true or false. There is absolutely no emotion involved. Or take a look at this claim. Higher levels of education are associated with higher average incomes. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing doesn't matter one bit here. The statement itself can be validated or totally debunked just by pulling up census data and income research. It's just clinically predicting and explaining a real-world outcome. Okay, so that's the data side. Now let's shift gears, flip over to the right side of our roadmap, and look at the values. If the left side was all about cold, hard data, this right side is where our humanity actually steps in. If positive economics is the detective, normative economics is the philosopher, or the judge. It focuses heavily on fairness, equity, social welfare, and basically the kind of society we actually want to live in. So instead of just describing reality, normative economics evaluates it. It's focused completely on what ought to be. Because of that, normative statements are deeply subjective. Since they depend on your personal values and your ethical compass, you simply cannot prove them true or false just by crunching numbers. Data alone cannot tell you what is fair, right? That requires a human value judgment about what outcomes we actually desire for our communities. Here's a classic normative claim. The government should increase taxes on cigarettes to improve public health. Notice something there. You can't mathematically prove that statement. You just can't, because it relies on a value judgment. It assumes that improving public health is a much higher priority than, say, letting consumers buy cheaper goods or just keeping taxes low in general. It's a recommendation based on a specific moral stance. Look at the underlying ethical claim in this one, too. Healthcare should be provided free of cost to all citizens. Again, because this is about a desired outcome, the kind of society we want to build, reasonable people can completely disagree here based on their own personal priorities. One person might value social equality above everything else, while another person might highly value reduced government spending. And the thing is, the data can't tell you which of those priorities is morally correct. So, moving on. How can you actually spot the difference in the wild? Seriously, how do you instantly know which lens a politician or a journalist or even your neighbor is using when they start talking about the economy? You need a mental metal detector, and it's all about looking for specific anchor words, clinical words like causes, increases, or will. Those almost always signal that someone is making a testable, positive claim. But the very second you hear moral words like should, ought to, fair, or better, boom, you have crossed the border into normative economics. They aren't just stating facts anymore, they are projecting their values onto you. If we put them head to head like this cheat sheet does, it gets really clear. Positive economics gives us the objective data, the foundation, the actual what is happening. Normative economics brings in the subjective opinions, the ethics, and the purpose to recommend what policies we actually should adopt. They have totally different but incredibly important jobs. So, let's see how this all comes together when we actually try to build something. We're going to use the minimum wage as a quick case study here. Making effective policy is essentially a three-step recipe. And honestly, you cannot bake a functioning society without both of these ingredients. First, you absolutely need the factual foundation. Second, you apply your societal priorities to those facts. And only then do you enact a policy. Let's see exactly how this plays out. Step 1 gives us the testable, positive facts about raising the minimum wage. Research shows us that, yes, it may raise the incomes of low-wage workers. That's a fact. But research also shows it increases business costs, and it might potentially reduce employment in certain sectors. Those are also facts. Notice how positive economics doesn't tell us what to do here. It just politely hands us a menu of consequences. Step 2 is where we bring in the normative values. And this is exactly where this shouting matches happen. If your society decides that priority A, reducing poverty, is the ultimate ethical goal, well, you're going to use those facts to argue for a wage increase. But if your society decides that priority B, maximizing employment opportunities for everyone, is the most important goal, you're going to vigorously oppose it. The disagreement on TV isn't really about the math. It's a fundamental clash over what we value more. So the really crucial takeaway here is that these two lenses are completely complementary. Facts alone do not build a society, because data just cannot tell you what's right or wrong. But values alone lack a structural foundation, and good intentions without hard data usually lead straight to disaster. We absolutely need both the objective detective and the subjective philosopher to make any kind of good policy. So the next time you're watching the news and you see two experts just yelling at each other, listen really closely to the words they're using. Are they actually debating the data, or are they just clashing over their values? And more importantly, as you evaluate the policies in your own community today, ask yourself, is your argument grounded in testable data of what is, or is it driven by subjective values of what ought to be? Knowing the difference truly changes everything. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.